In this next section, we're going to be talking about the organization of life. Life is organized into different categories, mostly depending on the scientists interested in studying them. The largest level of organization is referred to as an ecosystem. An ecosystem includes all the life forms in a particular area combined with the non-living physical components, such as air, sunlight, water, and so forth. Included within an ecosystem are what are considered communities. A community includes all of the living organisms of that area. That would be plants, animals, bacteria, fungi, and so forth. Within each community, there are populations, and the population is all the organisms of a specific species in a given area. A population is comprised of just a single species. Within a population is an organism. Organisms are individual living things. Organisms can consist, as we talked about before, of a single cell, such as in the case of bacteria or algae. In other cases, like in animals and plants, organisms can consist of many cells. If that's the case, an organism can then contain organ systems. An example of an organ system would be like the gastrointestinal tract. Alternatively, the respiratory tract or the nervous system are other organ systems. Organ systems are comprised of organs that all work together to form a very general function. Organs are collections of tissues that perform a specific function. Within the GI tract, we might have, for instance, the large intestine or the small intestine. These organs, as I mentioned, are comprised of tissues, and tissues all have a more specific function. But within tissues, when we talk about a tissue, tissues are made up of similar cells that all perform one function, or the same function. Within tissues, you can then take a look at individual cells. A cell is, as we talked about before, the basic unit of life. If we get smaller than cells, we're not talking about life anymore, we're talking about molecules. So when we talk about organelles or the nucleus, that is not a living thing, those are just a collection of molecules. This is part of the reason why we consider viruses to be non-living. They're just a collection of molecules. They're not comprised of cells. When we talk about molecules, these are collections of atoms. It's still matter, but it's not a living thing anymore. Molecules are comprised of atoms bound together. They can be fairly large, like DNA, or fairly small, like water or oxygen gas. A single atom is the smallest unit of matter. You can break apart atoms, and when you do, they're comprised of protons, neutrons, and electrons. Each proton is indistinguishable from other protons. And this is why atoms are considered the smallest unit of matter that cannot be subdivided without losing its properties. Because when you divide an atom and you break an atom apart, all protons are the same, all neutrons are the same, and all electrons are the same. Atoms are unique from other atoms because of the collection and types and numbers of neutrons, protons, and electrons that they have. But once you divide an atom up, it is no longer unique. All neutrons, protons, and electrons are the same and indistinguishable from other neutrons, protons, and electrons. Let's talk very briefly about protons, neutrons, and electrons. As you can see from this picture here, protons and neutrons are both located in the core or nucleus of the atom. Electrons are located in a cloud or shell or orbital surrounding that nucleus or core. Protons are what are seen there in the green. They have a positive charge. Neutrons are in blue, and they have no charge. They're neutral. And electrons are there in the orange, and they have a negative charge, one negative charge each. Protons and neutrons actually have mass. They have a mass of 1 atomic unit each, whereas electrons have no mass. If you compare then protons and neutrons, they are identical except for the fact that protons have a positive charge and neutrons have no charge. Electrons are very different than protons and neutrons in that they have essentially no mass. Their location in the atom is different. They're located in the shell or cloud surrounding the nucleus, and they have a negative charge. Let's now talk about how atoms can combine in different ways to form molecules. When atoms come together, they can form molecular bonds. These molecular bonds can be of a variety and different sort. We can see covalent bonds in some molecules, ionic bonds in other molecules, and hydrogen bonds in still other molecules. Let's talk about each one of these. Covalent bonds are the strongest of the 3 bonds that we just listed for you here. They are formed when 2 atoms share electrons between themselves. That's depicted here, where you can see the electrons are moving between the 2 atoms. Each oxygen atom is sharing, in this case, 2 electrons, forming this oxygen molecule. Because these electrons are being shared equally between these 2 atoms, this is a covalent bond, and it is a very strong bond. Covalent bonds can be single covalent bonds, double covalent bonds, or triple covalent bonds, depending on how many electrons are being shared between the 2 atoms. Because these 2 oxygen atoms are sharing 2 electrons each, this is a double covalent bond. If the atoms were sharing only 1 electron each, then that would be a single covalent bond. We find single covalent bonds in many molecules, including a single covalent bond between oxygen and hydrogen in water. Our second kind of bond that we mentioned here is an ionic bond. Ionic bonds are when 2 atoms transfer 1 or more electron from one atom to another. They are not sharing electrons. One atom is donating or giving an electron to the other atom. This is most commonly seen in acids, bases, and salt molecules. This is seen here in the salt molecule, sodium chloride, that we have in our diagram. If you remember, electrons have a negative charge, 1 negative charge each. So when an electron is donated from one atom to another, a charge is transferred along with it. That results in one atom having a negative charge, that's the one that accepted the electron, and the other atom that lost the electron now has a positive charge. These are referred to as ions. Each atom that has a charge, either a positive charge or a negative charge, is referred to as an ion. Ionic bonds result in the formation of ions because the electron is transferred from one atom to another, resulting in charged atoms or ions. Ionic bonds are of intermediate strength. Covalent bonds are the strongest. Ionic bonds are of intermediate strength. And of the 3 different bonds that we'll be talking about in this class, hydrogen bonds are the weakest of the 3. Hydrogen bonds are more bonds of attraction than they are true chemical bonds. They're the result of two atoms being attracted to each other because of a slight difference in their overall polarity. Oxygen in water molecules has a slight negative charge to it, and hydrogen has a slight positive end to it. In chemistry, opposites attract, and because there is a slight positive portion of this water molecule here, and a slight negative portion of this water molecule here, that's going to result in these two atoms being attracted to each other, forming a very weak hydrogen bond. This single water molecule here then will be slightly attracted to this single water molecule here. And you can see that different water molecules can be attracted to multiple other water molecules, forming a network of these weak hydrogen bonds. Hydrogen bonds, as you can tell by the name, always include hydrogen on one side, and then on the other side, it can either be oxygen, as we see here, or nitrogen. But in living systems, those are really the only options. In the next section, we'll take a look at much larger molecules used in living systems,